Good morning, welcome to another Sandbag Sunday, and basically this is the last of the Q&A sessions where people have asked me questions, and these are the three questions I'm going to finish it off with. One's about my time I spent with the Queen, one's about Boris Johnson, and one's about what I think of the royal family. It's a particularly sad day. Unfortunately, the Queen passed. So, you know, whilst I'm discussing my time, I had lunch. It wasn't just me and the Queen. The Queen didn't phone me up and say, "Hey, Chris, do you fancy lunch?" You know, it was a regimental dinner. 14 people were there, 13, 14 people were there. I was just fortunate enough to be one of them. And I've explained this earlier on in another vlog, so it's quite fortuitous, timing-wise, but it's not by design. So, you know, it's a very sad time for the country. I think the Queen was much loved and spent a lifetime of service. 96, you know, she came to the throne very early. I don't really remember what age, but particularly early. And very good, very good. Rather special for what she's done. And today's date, well, you know, on this day, it hardly needs to be told, really, of 9/11. The date is synonymous with a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers in New York City. And I think my heart goes out to all those people that died. And, you know, in particular, for the fire service and the police service that went into the Twin Towers and not knowing what caused it, or at the time, despite the dangers, went in there and did what they had to do, the best they could possibly do. And, you know, I think that's bravery, and all those people above the point of impact. What an impossible place to be. So I think it's quite apt at this time to have a moment of reflection for all those people that died at the Twin Towers, and moment of reflection for Her Majesty the Queen, a person who has worked hard and given tirelessly for the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. At another point, the Scottish poet in 1700, James Thomson, an English agriculturalist and writer, Arthur Young in 1741, English novelist, poet and essayist D.H. Lawrence. Well, I've heard of him, but I haven't heard of the other two. And English motorcycle racer Barry Sheene was born this day in 1950. He had a Suzuki in number 7. He was a very good GP. I think it was a GP racing, motorbikey, racy type chap. Died today in 1971 was Nikita Khrushchev. Chilean politician Salvador Allende in 1973. Other things on this day: in 1297, Scottish poet William Wallace. Scottish patriot William Wallace. He led the troops to victory over the English forces in the Battle of Stirling Bridge, in my best Scottish accent. The English soldier and statesman Oliver Cromwell in 1649 besieged the Catholic garrison of Drogheda in Ireland and was reported to have massacred most of its inhabitants. In 1777, during the War of Independence, the British defeated troops led by George Washington at the Battle of Brandywine Creek in Pennsylvania happened. Crimean War in 1855, the Russian stronghold Sevastopol. I think that's probably not how it's pronounced, but there we go. Was abandoned to the Allies after the 12-month siege. In 1895, the FA Cup was stolen from a shop window in Birmingham, where Cup winners Aston Villa had placed it on display. How naive. It was only in 1963 that an 83-year-old man admitted melting it down and making counterfeit coins. In 1978, a Bulgarian dissident, Georgy Markov, was... did he say he died? Yeah, he died of blood poisoning after being stabbed 4 days earlier by an attack using an umbrella tipped with rice in. Did a lot about Georgy Markov in my NBC course when I was an instructor. Basically stabbed on the embankment by an umbrella, and that was a little lead ball. In it was rice in, and it was tipped with a bit of wax. So as you prodded it in the body with the tip of the umbrella, the wax started to melt, and ricin is probably one of the most deadliest poisons known to man. Basically, it messes about with your bloodstream, and you can't recover. There was another fella who got stabbed in the same way, but there's probably not enough ricin in it. Can't remember what his name is. I'm just casting my mind back a bit. The famous Marlborough diamond was stolen by 2 Chicago gangsters from a London jeweller's shop in 1980. You American gangsters. Ugh. And in 1997, the referendum of devolution in Scotland was approved by an overwhelming majority, leading to a creation of a new Scottish Parliament. So, my time with the Queen. So I mentioned it some time ago on a vlog that the Queen knows an awful lot about drill, and there was a time at Buckingham Palace when we were on the forecourt that I did something which was against protocol. Now, you must understand that protocol on changing the guard and all that sort of stuff, you can't just do your own thing. Otherwise, London District Garrison would lose control. So there is a strict discipline of this is how the procedure's done, and that's the way it is, and there's no changing it. So what I did was not correct, but it was the right thing to do, and I think that's the difference. In my head, there's the correct thing, which is about protocol, policy, and all the other stuff, and there's the right thing to do, where sometimes policy and protocol doesn't account for what's happened, and you do what you think is best, and that's a situation I was in. So, generally speaking, Buckingham Palace, you have Buckingham Palace, and on the very end you have the guard room, and in front of Buckingham Palace is the forecourt, and in front of that is the gates, big cast iron metal fence with gates in, 3 gates. You have the north centre gate, you have the centre gate, and you have the south centre gate, and in front of all of that is the wedding cake, or the Victoria Memorial, as it's properly known as. And in line with that Victoria Memorial is an archway, and any royal visitors generally come in the centre gate, straight in the archway, and job's done. So then you have the old guard and the new guard facing each other, so as you pay compliments, royal, or the visitor, the royal, comes in the centre, you pay compliments, and you're facing the royals. Okay. That's normal. However, centre gate was closed, so any royal visits had to go in the north centre gate, which is behind the new guard. When, as we had taken over from, or we were taking over from, whichever guards regiment it was in the red tunics and bearskins, we had our backs towards the north centre gate. Now, for whatever reason, and I don't really know, that I was the only senior rank other than senior sergeants. That left me out on the forecourt. It's not that, you know, generally speaking, not much happens, but a copper come across to me and he goes, Her Majesty the Queen's coming in very shortly. Okay, so I made my way from my position at the back of the new guard to a position where I could control both the old and the new guard. So marched out, turned around. I said to my senior sergeant, stand by, mate. Okay. And then, not there was any nudging, but what people do is communicate down the line, stand by, stand by, stand by. And I'm sure that's exactly what the army, the Guards regiment was doing. Copper comes across again, he goes, she's due in about 30 seconds. Okay. Caught the eye of the Guard senior sergeant, and then I started off. Old and new guards, shun. Old and new guards, slope arms. New guard about to turn, and as the Queen comes in, old and new guards, royal salute, present arms. Okay. So I put up salute, and then the Queen went indoors. It's, you know, palace. She went indoors. Anyway, then it was normal procedure. A new guard about turn, old and new guard shoulder arms, old and new guard stand at ease, old and new guard stand easy. We're back to square one, and I took my place in the back of the new guard, and then basically that everything sort of continued as normal from there on in. Anyway, at lunch, Her Majesty asked the squadron commander what happened on the forecourt. He goes, oh, I don't know, you need to speak to Mr. Mears. Mr. Mears, she said in that voice, why did you do what you did on the forecourt? And my heart stopped. Well, it didn't, but you know, it kind of boom, boom. The adrenaline, it was the voice. Why did you do what you did on the forecourt? I said, I took a risk actually. And I said, I understand it's against protocol, and I apologise, you know, but I have never paid compliments to you with my back, or my troops with our back towards you. I said, I thought it was disrespectful, so I turned the new guard about, and we paid compliments duly towards you and we were facing you. Thank you very much, she said. When I went in, first thing I did was phone my husband up, and I said to him, do you know what my colour squadron did? She was very pleased. Woohoo! I was a good boy. I was a good boy that day. You know, I also, when things went quiet, I sort of said, oh, Your Majesty, can I ask you a question? She goes, yes, Mr. Mears, yes. It's not my question, my children want to know, because they've seen Peppa Pig, and Peppa Pig goes to visit the Queen, and then they end up by jumping up and down in muddy puddles together. My kids want to know, do you jump up and down in muddy puddles? And everybody just kind of stopped. What on earth? So then we had a conversation about children, and it was light-hearted, it was quite humorous, and then she said, oh, you can tell your kids that I do wear my welly boots, but I don't jump up and down in muddy puddles. I said, I thought that might be the answer, but I just wanted to check. She just, yeah, okay, that's one. Anyway, after that, got changed in my whistle and flute suit, and I got changed in that, and I went to the Pall Mall, the RAC club, where I was meeting some regimental officers for after dinner drinks. And as I went in, I said, oh, yes, Mr. Mears, the concierge said, yes, Mr. Mears, they're on the left. Okay, thank you very much. Proper gentleman's club this is. The splendour of it all. I felt very much out of place. And as I walked in, they go, "Hey, here he is, fancy asking the Queen about Pepper." I said, "How did you know that? It's only just happened." Oh, it's gone everywhere. It's gone viral on the Officer Network. I said, "Oh, nice one. Cheers." Oh, I said to him, "Anyway, whose round is it? I'm the lowest paid here, so it's not mine." Anyway, that conversation, lunch with the Queen, went very well. That's the reasons why, and yeah, there we go. I've gone through this time and time again. I've had a few dry rehearsals. It's quite a challenging question, and I'm opening myself up a lot on this channel with my political view. And some people have said, "Oh no," but I'm not going to shy away from the question because that's weak. And you know, whilst I'm opening myself up, I hope you as the viewers understand this is my perspective, this is my point of view. If you want to troll me, please don't. You know, if you're not willing to take somebody else's point of view and perhaps learn and perhaps learn from my viewpoint, then switch off, don't bother watching. I can't, it's not that I can't handle trolling. There's a guy that tried doing it earlier in the week, and I wrote something back to him. He's not come back since. So I don't want a hard time over my views, but I want to be balanced, and I think that's something that has not been happening across the media. I think a lot of people have been after Boris, and I'll explain why during this bit. Okay, the question. "Hi Chris, I remember you briefly mentioning your selection of Boris Johnson books, and given what we know of the man, I'm struggling to reconcile what he represents and how decent you are. Sorry, quite personal, but if you're happy to talk about this, I'd be keen to learn more. Thanks." And that was from John. Okay, here we go. Let's find my notes. Now, I have made notes on this, only to keep me on track more than anything else. My analysis of this is based on one thing: leadership. Leadership's a very personal thing, and there's thousands of books on leadership. Who gets it right, who gets it wrong, who's got the ideal leadership? Well, it's so difficult. That's why there's thousands of books on it. Everybody has a different perspective. This is mine. Okay. I watched a YouTube video by Led by Donkeys about Boris's legacy, and whilst I watched it all, it was all negative. Therefore, it gave an extreme bias opinion, albeit factual, about Boris's legacy in their opinion. And they have tens of thousands of viewers. I'm going to have a couple of thousand. But I believe the mainstream media has been biased against Boris and anything he's done. They've tried to turn it as a sensationalist story of Boris and all, negative, toxic even. And I believe Boris is a bit of a populist. He likes to be popular. I think he's that type of guy, the Red Wall up in the north of England, I don't think they wanted to vote Conservative. They wanted to vote Boris because they believed Boris would do something about Brexit, and so did I, to be fair. But when he was Foreign Secretary, I think from that point on the press were after him, and he supported Theresa May until the point where he disagreed and then resigned as Foreign Minister because of how she was handling Brexit. Some people argue that all Boris has done is remapped what Theresa May did as far as Brexit was concerned. basically the same policy. Now, when I taught management and leadership at the Airman's Command Squadron, there was a lead that the students had to do, and if you played by the absolute letter of the law, not many people could do this lead. It was a very difficult lead. And people completed the task, but they broke a few rules along the way, and we used to discuss that at the debrief, and why did the rules break, and what, how important are the rules, and all this sort of stuff. And people would say, yeah, okay, fair enough, but I took the chance and it failed, and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, there was one individual. I used to have a person that comes out and was a bystander, just observer watching. And I said to the observer, what's going to happen here then? He goes, oh, I think it's, it's going all right, but is he going to succeed? No. I said, agreed. Not many people do succeed on this lead. It's quite a difficult one. And he's got that because, just to test him. Okay. About 5 minutes later, I thought, hello. Actually, this person may succeed. And so I said to the observer, how's he doing? He goes, oh, he's doing all right, isn't he? I said, is there anything he needs? He said, oh, he could do with an extra bit of hand. He could do with an extra bit of help, couldn't he? I said, yeah, you're right, he could. So what are you doing then? So this fella threw his notebook and pencil down and charged off and gave this leader a hand, and they completed the task. And at the end I was going, yes, good lad. He succeeded in the task and played by all the rules and absolutely nailed it. And I said to him afterwards, that was brilliant. I didn't believe you would do it, but you absolutely nailed it. And you nailed it because you, the person, and your qualities and your style of leadership, the one person that could have done this right was you. Well done. And I think that was Boris. I think his personality, his traits, his charisma, his way of dealing with stuff made Brexit happen. And in that respect, Boris is a very good orator. He is quick-witted, he's supportive, he's upbeat, he's witty, he's clever. And I don't think we've had a Prime Minister like Boris. It's known very well that Boris likes Churchill and perhaps models himself on him a bit. And why not have someone at the top that you aspire to be like? Churchill was one of these people that could talk to the masses very well, and he did that by understanding the three principal learning styles of auditory, kinesthetic and auditory, kinesthetic and visual. But Churchill didn't have to contend with the toxic media, the press, Twitter. But Churchill was very clever. He only had the wireless transistor radio, which few people had in the country at the time, and people used to crowd round somebody's house that had a transistor radio just to listen to what Churchill had to say. And Churchill understood the three learning styles and would write his speeches understanding what resonates with people. So he would use strong, clear language that allowed people to tune in to his vision and create harmony within the country, because there's one person that could talk on the radio. It was him. So whilst Churchill was a great leader, I wonder how he would have coped in today's world. I think it's extremely difficult for anyone today to cope in today's world. Boris models himself on that, and he's able to communicate and writes great speeches and has his clear, defined messages, make Britain great. But I think the media are out of touch, and this is what leads me into Brexit a little bit. The media are well schooled. They did well at school, they did well at university, and they've got good jobs, and basically, you know, they have an opinion that can be sold to the masses, and I think they can sway lots of decisions of people that sit on the fence, and I think they have done. And it doesn't matter what party in the UK you vote for, I think all will do pretty much the same thing, and the consequence of that is the rich people get richer, not by design but consequence of policy. And it's not Pareto's distribution, you know, but that has part to do with it anyway, so rich people will always be rich. And I haven't got a problem with rich people being rich, you know, businessmen, entrepreneurs. And I said last week about equality of outcome, what I should have mentioned was equality of opportunity, because equality of opportunity is about competence. And if you've got a competent person who's in an organisation, why shouldn't that person reach the top? And if you've got a competent person who is a bricklayer and makes a lot of money bricklaying because they are the best bricklayer going, then why shouldn't that person get a lot of money? And that's I got it wrong last week. It's about equality of opportunity. But Brexit, I read a book called Divided by Tim Marshall. A great book if ever you want to understand stuff in the UK and how the UK happens, and he talks about 10 different countries as well. But you know, I was very interested in the UK, and he discussed by using the homework by a guy called David Goodhart. David Goodhart wrote about the somewheres and the anywheres, which led to Brexit. The anywheres are the political class, the media class, the upper class, the people that are well educated, well schooled, well universitied, and they could work anywhere because they have cross transferable skills. So it didn't matter whether in France, Germany, Italy, Spain, wherever it is in Europe, they could work and do well. And they don't necessarily have a strong allegiance to this country, the UK. The somewheres are people who haven't got transferable skills, went to the school of life, and have got a job generally within 20 miles of where they were brought up. And when the country opened up its borders to new European countries that had come into the EU, we opened up our borders, and the government said about 13,000 people will emigrate. They got that wrong. About 250,000 people a year emigrated, and they were taking the jobs of the somewheres, of the people that didn't have cross-transferable skills. And because they demanded less wage, they marginalised the somewheres, the people who worked in their communities, who understood the culture, who were very British. They weren't racist, they weren't bigots, they weren't anything. All they were doing was concerned for their own livelihoods and jobs, and that people were coming in and taking away from them. And then when it came down to the vote of Brexit, of course the somewheres outnumbered the anywheres. Only just, but they did. And I think the anywheres were a little bit annoyed that now they can no longer work in these European countries without an awful lot of policy change, you know, paperwork and all that sort of stuff, and 6 months at a time, and they have to come back to the UK and all of that stuff. And you know, and I think they were annoyed that Brexit was done, and I get it, and I can align to that, because I'm a somewhere. I'm very proud to be British, and I don't think I've got transferable skills, and I fall into that category. And it's post Brexit that I've done this reading, and I get it. I think David Goodhart has done a good job articulating it so I could understand it. Boris was able to communicate that to the masses, and he was able to speak to the somewheres who agreed with him, and they wanted him to get Brexit done. Now, whether Brexit's a good thing or not, remains to be seen. COVID's got in the way, a big way. Russian-Ukraine war has got in the way. And we're going to have a very challenging winter time. And, you know, it's going to be a challenge, full stop. And had these things not happened, then maybe Boris would still be in government. Undoubtedly, it's still being Prime Minister. But when I link that back down to Led by Donkeys, the YouTube video, as I said, that was correct, factually correct. But they majored it on Partygate. And Partygate, so what? However, it's the detail of Partygate which I think led to Boris's downfall. As I said earlier, Boris was a supporter of his staff. If you're a football team manager, you don't necessarily berate your team in front, your players in front of the camera. You know, when you're asked by pundits this, that, and the other, you have those conversations out of sight of anyone. You know, those behind doors conversations that people have. And I think Boris, when Dominic Cummings messed up and went to Barnard Castle, now for whatever reason Dominic Cummings thought he was doing the right thing, it was not the correct thing. And when he come back to Downing Street, there should have been a bit of a discussion, and Boris should have said to him, I'd love to support you, but I can't. You broke the rules. We made the rules. You can't get away with breaking the rules, because then that shows me as being a weak leader. He should have made Dominic resign or sacked him, either or. But then you don't know what political wranglings was going around about. You have to be in the shoes of both parties, and it's a shame. I haven't really got embroiled into the Cummings effect afterwards of, you know, slating off Boris, this, that, and the other. I haven't bothered reading it because I just think he was sad, got caught out. And, you know, he was the start of Boris's downfall. Partygate. I don't believe that the party at number 10 has been the only party in the country behind closed doors. Don't believe it. However, when you are at the top of your game, when you're at number 10, you cannot break the rules. You've made the rules, you've got to stick by them. So for whatever reasons these parties have happened, these little drinky poos, irrespective of whether they were in the outside in the garden, totally distant, and people were within their bubbles, the fact it happened, it shouldn't have done. Because what does that look like to the masses? And whilst I think that was the concept behind it, in which case I'm actually playing by the rules, but didn't think of the wider complications of this getting out. And the other thing was timing. The day before the Queen had the funeral for her husband wasn't the brightest move, number 10, whoever organised it. And if Boris was there, you shouldn't have been. If Boris was there to say, you lot, go back inside and sort yourselves out, who organised this, you're fired, then, you know, fine, get it. I think there was a lot of poor leadership within the number 10 staff, chief of staff, if there is a chief of staff, or anyone who attended that. They all ought to have a strong look at themselves, because the timing was wrong and what happened was wrong. And Boris, unfortunately, at the top, you're accountable, you're responsible, and you've tried to waffle out of it. And I think there's times in your life that things happen and you've got to red team that or game that theory out and say, wrong move. and to waffle probably isn't the best thing, even though everyone will think about trying to save their own skin, and I get that, but it should never have happened, and I think poor leadership, and I think all of that, and I actually think Boris was number 10 must have been a great place to work with Boris. I think he was a good time guy. I think he's very supportive of all his staff, and he was particularly during COVID supportive of the NHS and even the care homes. A little story on the care homes, and this is just one specific thing. I know an individual who had been cared for 2 years by people coming to the home. 2 months in a care home, died of COVID. So I think whilst there are some good care homes, I don't necessarily think they dealt with the situation. But Boris never slagged them off. He supported them throughout the whole way and offered situations to help people along the way. And that leads me to furlough. I'd never heard of furlough before furlough, but I think the government were too trusting of organisations, and I think that organisations, businesses took the mick. I would have said, if I had been in Prime Minister at the time, you can borrow. Wrong. You can have whatever money you want, whatever money you need, but it's a borrow. You're paying it back. So I wonder how many of these organisations would have taken as much money as they did, knowing that they have to pay it back. Big hands view. Oh no, I haven't gamed that out myself. I'm not bright enough, but that's why number 10 has so many different advisors to here's an idea, and and they game it out, red team it out. But I think the culture at number 10 took the mick out of Boris, and I think everybody enjoyed going to work there. He was, I think he's a well-liked man, and his culture, well, I don't think he was hard enough, let's put it that way. He was too popular. Liz is now in charge, Liz Truss. She's got to galvanise the country. There's people saying she ought to have an election, a snap election. Liz, if you won't ever listen to this, but don't, in my opinion. I think you need to gain trust of the country, and you need to get winter done before you go into a snap election. But Boris's parting speech was good, true Boris fashion, bit witty, and thanked everybody and never slagged anyone off, and I think that's very statesman-like, and I think Boris was a statesman, albeit he allowed situations to run out of hand due, in my opinion, to poor leadership. He's gone. But I don't think we can underestimate the power of toxic comments on Twitter, on the news, on anything. Everybody's having a pop at what someone does throughout your job. And I've said I felt sorry for Boris, and I do, and there's a reason for that. When I was on the squadron, I can remember, as a warrant officer, I can remember talking to the lads in the tea bar, and we, having a bit of a conversation. And one of the lads, I held a bit of an audience, about 4 or 5 blokes. And then one of the lads said, "You're right, really, aren't you?" Well, what do you mean by "I'm all right, really"? That supposes that you didn't think I was. Well, yeah. He said, well, kind of what we've been told about you. And now speaking to you, it's different. And he said, so you never gave this order? Why would I do that? And you never said that? No, why? And he said, it does appear that lots of people, some people, are blaming you when things go wrong, and yet you've had nothing to do with it. Well, no, because I allow the people in charge of the divs, of the flights, to do that. Nothing to do with me. I do squadron politics, not flight politics. Oh. So these orders that you come up with, it's probably made from somebody else, and then they always blame you. It does appear that way. I don't know what's been said or whatever. And from that time onwards, that permutated. So people started talking to me and treating me like a human being instead of a dickhead. And sometimes I think if certain individuals portray a toxic viewpoint of the Prime Minister, it doesn't take long for that to catch on, particularly if they've got an awful lot of followers. And if it's not just one individual, it's all the political correspondents of all the big channels and the newspapers. Not all, but some, most. It does have a knock-on effect, and I wonder if people's perceptions of Boris have changed because of that toxic nature that he's been living under. And I wonder, as I did at the time, you kind of go to bed and think, what do I do wrong? How could have I improved? How could I do this? And you need to, I've said it before, you need to walk in someone's shoes. And I think to walk in Boris's shoes must have been very difficult. A very difficult time with everyone having a pop at you all the time. But leadership, you don't feel the burn until you're at the top, because someone always has got someone else to blame. It's not about being popular as a leader, it's about being respected, and I think perhaps that balance was a bit wrong. He needed to be a bit harder. Politicians are pretty much the same. They all backbite each other. There's all those in-house politics, and they're all on the make. They get paid a wage, and I think their allowances are extortionate that we, the taxpayer, have to fork out for. Public money they're spending, and they get an awful lot of allowances, and I think that ought to be looked at, because again, they're not providing the example. So enough of Boris. There's a question asked about what I believe, what my thoughts are of the royal family. Now is not the time. The royal family are in mourning. I'm not going to offer an opinion at this time. So in which case, shorter video than perhaps giving my view on all the rest of it. It may not be next week. It will be in the future, of boating accidents and so what. What's the so what's of all of that? For me, I just think it's useful. Again, thanks for watching, thanks for liking, thanks for subscribing. Next week more the same. Comment below if you want to comment. I think I've given a fair reflection on today's Sandbag Sunday of my feelings of why I like Boris. That's it really. Can't knock someone for that, I don't think. I hope not. See you next week. Oh, and thanks.